Hi everybody, Sean the Pug Productions here. Today I'm just going to watch some random videos, so to see if I can get this, well, what the fuck, to see if I can get, if this, cause for the stupid roly-poly thing, I can't believe I got that copyright, and then I got a copyright for Thomas and the Kit Kat 4, that's stupid, don't even know how I got it, so meh. So, what should we do? Oh, I know. If anyone wants to know what this is, this ship was basically one of my favorite ships, but it was supposed to be, saved by Crystal Cruises, but that plan was canned, cause no one gave a fucking shit. Cause the thing is, even though that ship is like the fucking fastest ship on the Atlantic and still holds the speed record, still wish that thing was still... I wish it didn't look like what it did today. It's sad. Anyway, besides that, let's look at Big Boy. And, you know, I'm still thinking... If I got... I don't know if I get copyrighted if I watch Railway Roundabout. Let's... I really want...
In the late 1950s and early...
If anyone wants to know what Railway Roundabout is, it's an old show made by... Hold on a minute. Anyway, the Railway Roundabout is a son of a tit.
A short distance along the North Pembrokeshire coast.
I'm trying to... Railway Roundabout is basically a set of films made by Patrick Whitehouse and John Adams, which this film will explain to you, but this was made back in like the 1950s, 60s. So this is basically in the collection of the National Railway Museum of York. And you might notice that some of these engines I will recognize, even though this is basically just like Top Gear, except it's for locomotives. So anyway, let's just get this started out.
In the late 1950s and early 1960s, steam was enjoying its Indian summer as the much-loved Stephenson locomotive gave way throughout the world to the alien diesel and electric locomotives.
Black Fives.
In Great Britain, interest in railways was on the increase.
Class
and the
101.
then novel
Shoot.
BBC television was persuaded
Castle.
that it was an audience for pure railway films.
Jubilee
and so
or Black
Railway
Five.
Roundabout
Hey,
was
it's
formed.
Declan!
For 5 years, from 1958 to 1962, Patrick Whitehouse and John Adams filmed, edited and produced films about all aspects of railways, presenting 10 25-minute shows a year at 5:30 in the afternoon, ostensibly for children, but in time for many adults to tune in. The films themselves were carefully retained and are now part of our national heritage, being held in the care of the National Railway Museum at York. The programmes which form this series of 5 have been prepared from those original films, so we can all once again relive the great days of the Railway Roundabout. As was the case in 1958, the first feature recorded by the Railway Roundabout team in 1959 was the closure
Forgot that class.
of
I
the
think that's
Crookham
a
railway line.
55XX.
This time those emanating from Monmouth to both Ross-on-Wye and Chepstow.
Ross-on-Wye.
The first location visited was
Oh
Ross-on-Wye.
no, I think I might know this.
Monmouth Auto Train.
Oh my god, it's the Oliver! Oliver, I thought you died! No, you didn't. No. Look, it's Oliver the Great Western Engine. And kids, this is what you call auto train. They run backwards. Deal with
Pat
it.
Whitehouse and John Adams didn't attend on the last day of all, on which only an enthusiast special ran, but the day before, when the last normal service trains ran. This enabled them to record a number of trains, and of course to ride in the driver's compartment of one of the auto-trailers along the Wye Valley.
Auto trailers, kids. Auto coaches.
Today, much of the
They
course
are
of this line
used
has
to
been
drive the
obliterated by
engine
the
backwards, so
M50
that means
motorway.
the engine doesn't have to
For,
run around its
although it had
train.
many scenic attractions, the Wye Valley didn't attract many tourists and had few centres of population. The railway was losing £10,000 a year, and even the local bus services couldn't be made to pay.
That is equivalent to about,
Monmouth was approached via a girder bridge over the River Wye,
I think about
which turned to the south,
about
near
like
towards Chepstow.
$12,000.
Monmouth had two stations, the original Monmouth, May Hill, on the far side of the bridge, and Monmouth, Troy.
Here
which
comes,
was the
here
junction
comes old
on the
Ollie.
Wye Valley
Hi,
line
old
Chepstow.
Ollie. Here comes the old Ollie. Kids, that's what auto coaches are. And that's what an auto train is. There goes Oliver. Oliver, where's Toad?
The standard
I don't
locomotives
know.
on the Wye Valley lines were the Collett 1400 auto tanks and the familiar pannier tanks.
1400s, that's what they call them. Hey, look, a duck. Quack, quack.
Railway enthusiasts made up the majority of the passengers on this last weekend. Overnight snow was to present a different scene for the final day. On the Gloucester to South Wales main line, Chepstow was the junction station for the 13 3/4 mile branch to Monmouth,
Quack, quack.
following the meandering Wye Valley. Originally, there'd been only 4 intermediate stations, but an effort to increase custom by the siting of 6 additional halts could not stem the tide of passengers deserting the railway.
Then why did you guys make 6 halts anyway? The usual clickety-clack on the tracks.
Redbrook was the last station before Monmouth, and only had good sidings with no passing facilities. The line crossed and recrossed the River Wye and was consequently expensive to maintain. It was reported that this branch was losing £13,000 a year on passenger services alone, but it was to survive for a further 5 years for freight use only.
As
And a small
usual.
portion of the Chepstow end is still in use today, running to the stone quarry at Tydenham.
Here comes Duck, the Great Western Engine.
Monmouth Troy had once been a through
Monmouth
station.
Troy, really?
The line through the tunnel to Pontypool Road had seen its last passenger services in May 1955.
Big old Ducky again.
The pannier tank wasn't auto-fitted, so it had to run round.
Even though in the
Last day,
Railway
all
Series,
trains
Duck
were
is
specially strengthened,
auto-fitted
a
with,
single auto-coach usually
that.
having sufficed.
except Oliver is. That is. A little bit.
As the evening drew in, the last trains were prepared at Monmouth. The first of these to go was to Chepstow.
Kids, this is what engines do if they don't have turntables.
Once the pannier had left, the 1400 tank was able to run round, as its 4-coach last train wasn't auto-fitted. Sadly, its departure couldn't be filmed, as the light had gone.
Old Ollie couples up and then goes bye-bye.
A relic of the Victorian era was the next target for Pat Whitehouse.
Oh god, I've never seen that
2-4
type
wheel
before.
arrangement was effectively obsolete by the 1890s. But the Great Eastern Railway produced what was to become the last surviving type of this wheel arrangement in the 1890s. Known as intermediates, they were classified as E4 by the London and North Eastern Railway. Originally, there were 100 in the class, but by 1959, only this one survived in use as Cambridge's pilot.
As a pilot. I wonder about British Railways sometimes. Putting tender engines as pilots is not an actually good idea.
And was looked after by its crews with its bright work polished. The Cambridge University Railway Club had often hired it at weekends for use on the Mildenhall branch. The letters RA2 under its number signified that it had route availability number 2, which meant it could go on almost any lines.
But what's the other what's the other part that it cannot go on? You didn't tell us that.
82 of the engines had gone for scrap as long ago as 1940, but the 18 survivors remained intact until 1954, their lightweight making them useful on many secondary routes, some of them migrating northwards from their familiar East Anglian territory. This
East
engine was the
Anglian.
final survivor.
Isn't that where
Tubby
lives? Yeah, no, I'm not bringing that back.
To its original Great Eastern Royal Blue livery as number 490, but sadly not in working condition.
Oh, damn it. That's the sad thing. You don't bring old engines back into working condition. Yet this needs to happen more. England needs more steam engines to be brought back. Well, they'd probably be too lazy. They can't bring back 1218 because they're too fat, and they can't because they lost most of the parts while reassembling it.
The railway roundabout duo of Pat Whitehouse and John Adams were natives of the Birmingham area, and consequently they were well placed to film a special train.
Oh, it's Donald! Wait, no, wait a minute. That's not a... Oh, that's a J15. Doi! My name's Sean and I'm a dumbass. Oh. It wasn't a freaking J15 either. It was a fucking, 2F. I'm stupid.
Talking to the Birmingham New Street station master before the train set out past a Jubilee.
A Jubilee. Hello, I is Jubilee. I look like Black 5, and even though I am not black. Chuff, chuff, chuff. Fuck off. Question. Why are they still using,
A second 2F brought up the rear of the train, as the first destination was the Harborne branch, just a few miles to the west of New Street.
Question is, why are they using LMS coaches? Shouldn't the BR Mark 1s been in this already? Mark 1s were already in service by like the end of the 50s.
As a through route to the Halesowen branch at Lappel, but had been built as a 3.5-mile suburban branch. It had remained independent until 1922, although worked by the London and North Western Railway from the start, and had been highly successful. It was the best-paying suburban branch by far, and before the First World War had 27 trains each way daily.
God damn.
However, it was an early victim of bus competition and lost its passenger services during the economic depression of the 1930s on the 26th of November 1934. In those days, railways still carried a large proportion of freight traffic, and the little branch survived on this business until November 1963, a further 29 years.
So 29 years after they lose passenger service, that doesn't get me because bus services usually didn't come up that big until like the 60s. That's what's weird. Even though the bus wasn't that fully developed in the 30s.
One of the factories served by the branch was the Chad Valley Toy Company, where they made Great Western jigsaw puzzles, amongst other things.
Jigsaw puzzles,
Birmingham
really?
was served by 3 main railways.
It's Daisy. Oh wait, no, Daisy's a single one. Damn it.
The latter's route to the southwest was joined to the northwestern
Smithwick.
Junction.
Schmetterling.
Great Western lines are in the foreground,
Quack,
left
quack.
leading to Handsworth and Birmingham Snow Hill, whilst the line in the background, up which the SLS special is proceeding, was
It's
connecting
Duke
spur to the
and
NWR
Donald and
Houston.
Douglas.
This line
Even though
remains in use
the
today
Donald
for
and
services
Douglas
to
are
Starbridge, Kidderminster, and
supposed to be
Worcester.
8 Caledonian 812s, but these are 2S, so these are the only ones that deal with it. And there goes fucking Daisy, even though she's a triple unit for some reason, I don't know why. God damn it.
Halesowen was an important black country town, which owed its growth to the Industrial Revolution. Unfortunately, it had been bypassed by the line to Stour Bridge and had consequently been served only by a single line branch that ran between Old Hill on the Stourbridge line and the Midland Railway main line at Northfield, 6 miles to the north of Bromsgrove, to which a further line had been projected from Halesowen but never built. The station at Halesowen was at the foot of banks in both directions, the severe gradients necessitating banking engines.
God fucking damn, how many people are on that
2F
fucking
was
train?
provided to bank the special, which had arrived from the Old Hill direction. Halesowen Station had not seen timetabled public trains since 1927, when trains from Old Hill had ceased. The line from Halesowen itself to the Midland Main Line was jointly owned by the Great Western and the Midland Railway, and had lost its passenger services as long ago as 1919, although the stations remained in good condition.
1919?
For nearly 40 years, unadvertised workmen's trains continued to run, being provided by the Great Western from Old Hill to Longbridge, just short of the Midland Main Line, where the Austin Car Company had their works. These had been withdrawn in September 1958, but the line continued to carry freight traffic until 1964.
The hell?
The first crossing loop on the line was at Huntington, where Bluebird toffees are made. This is set
Toffees.
at the top of the bank from Halesowen.
The
The
fuck
bank
is a
is
toffee?
detached here.
I'm just wondering why the fuck do they still... Shouldn't they have reverted
Finally, we
to
see the
Mark
special
1s?
running through the complex of lines at the Longbridge Works. 3 shunting
Longbridge.
engines were kept here in the shed on the right. The next station on the Midland Main Line was
Burnt Green.
the junction for the cross-country
Green.
branch line that served
Okay,
the important Worcestershire
question.
town of Redditch,
That's the
and
weirdest thing.
bypassed the Lickey Incline to give
Oh yeah,
route
this is the one that
Cheltenham and
bypassed
Gloucester
Lickey Incline.
via Evesham and
Thanks a
Ashford.
lot. You guys scrapped Big Bertha. You guys should
Coming off the
die
main
in a
line at
hole.
Barnt Green was a train from Birmingham.
Oh, it's a
Newton,
compound.
headed by one of the famous Fowler compounds. This engine had been especially rostered for the
Hey,
cameras
Doc
in order to
Hudson.
make this
Doc Hudson
full
on the
railway
lower
run.
left.
This shows how the railways cooperated with Pat Whitehouse and John Adams. By this time, Railway Roundabout had established itself on television, and British Railways management was realizing the publicity value of a TV program, aimed as it was at both boys and adults. The live
Adults.
commentary given by Pat and John was tailored to have an educational benefit, and scenes were shot to illustrate various points, such as these of watering and handing over the token at Redditch. The railway was
Watering.
single line beyond the town, and only the driver in possession of the token was allowed to run
I
straight
forgot
to the
about
stretch
those
to which the
tokens.
token
Those things
referred.
were like...
This was and remains the standard practice for working single-line railways. Although today the tokens are electronic signals rather than physical pieces of metal.
Yeah, they're not like that
The
anymore.
tokens were exchanged manually, either when the train was stopped in a station, or, if not travelling too quickly, on the move. The
Yeah,
token
they would
was
just
put in a
grab
pouch
'em.
attached to a large hoop, which then could be slipped over the engineman's arm. Each section of the railway between signal boxes would have a token or staff inscribed with the names of the section to which it applied. Various methods were adopted to synchronize the tokens with signalling and pointer words, but the most common
41157.
took the form of a key, which could be inserted
Why
into
isn't
a
it-
mechanical apparatus
why isn't it
run
1000,
by
goddammit?
to enable the train to proceed. The system in use here was known as token full block.
Token
The
full block.
locomotive number 41157, built in 1925 by the North British Locomotive Company of Glasgow, was cleaned up for its television stardom and worked the train for 2 days for the cameras.
You're telling me that
Station
wasn't an
earlier
original
was built
Midland
to the design of
compound?
Sir Henry Fowler, the second LMS chief mechanical engineer, and the design was a development of Johnson and Dealey's Midland compound, first produced in the early 1900s. The onboard camera was in use on one run and
Broom
captured in
Junction!
one
Broom!
small country
Would you like a
junction
broom
station,
with that,
where the
sir?
former
No, fuck off.
Stratford-upon-Avon and Midland Junction Railway came in.
Yeah, shed code 17A.
This line had a colourful history.
I forgot that
The
shed
section
code.
from Stratford to Broome Junction was to close in 1960. It had lost its passenger services in 1947.
I'd love to see one of those compounds.
The SMJ is seen disappearing behind the compound. Salford Priors was the next station after Broome Junction. Here Pat saw some
Broome
road rollers
Junction.
rusting quietly away. To Today, they would attract as much attention
Oh,
as
ooh, it's George and Porge. Wait, George, how are you still alive? I don't give a shit.
These engines were the first LMS express passenger engines and were soon hopelessly underpowered for the increasingly heavy mainline trains. They did much good work in Scotland and on former Midland
Scotland?
lines, but were soon relegated to secondary work as the LMS caught up with modern Pacific and 460 designs for the principal duties. This cross-country line was usually worked by Fowler's large 264 tank engines, which had the same boiler as the compounds. At Evesham, the Great Western's Cotswold line to Worcester, known as the Old Worse and Worse, had its own station to the right of our train.
Boiler.
The line had been transferred to the Western region upon nationalisation, and beyond Evesham was double track. A junction had been put in at Evesham to allow the route to be used as a diversionary line for Cheltenham to Honeybourne trains.
This is why I wonder, why
The line was known
do...
as the Loop and rejoined the Midland Main Line at Ashchurch. It was used as an alternative route for freight trains.
This is
avoiding
why
the
I
Vicky
wonder
Incline,
why British
but was
Railways
never engineered to
transitioned
express
this
standards,
from
becoming redundant in the 1960s.
the Midland region to the Western region.
The latter also being axed by Dr. Beeching.
Fuck
Closed
you, Dr.
passengers
Beeching.
In 1963, with freight finishing in the following year.
Freight finishing in the
Whilst
following
number
year.
41157 was destined for the scrap heap in 1960,
Here we
the
are.
first of the line, number 41000, was destined to live on. Here we see her in her final British Railways guise at Crewe Works, before being taken
Crewe,
to Derby
I
for
forgot
a
about
complete
that.
overhaul and restoration.
They'll get... I'm sending you to Crewe,
Here
a
she was
fine
subjected
place
to
for
an
sick
effective
engines.
rebuild rather
They'll
than
give you a
simple
new
overhaul.
shape and a larger
This was not
firebox.
the first time
You'll
she'd
be
been
a
rebuilt.
you'll be a
The history
better
of the
engine,
Midland
and you
compounds
won't
is long
bleed
and
special
complicated.
coal anymore.
Midland
Won't that be
Railway's
nice?
philosophy throughout its existence had been to run light, frequent trains, and to this end, built a large number of moderately dimensional locomotives, both passenger and freight use. This was carried through when heavier trains were required, the policy being simply to double-head these, a practice which other railways tried to avoid due to the staffing costs.
Don't double head,
Throughout the
kids.
Victorian era, the Midland flew in the face of orthodoxy, reintroducing single driving-wheeled express engines in the 1890s when other railways were using 440s, and introducing very small 440s in the early part of the 20th century when others were building 460s. However, there was a need for more powerful locomotives, but in Midland tradition, this need was met by increasing the power of the 440s rather than opting for larger engines. There was a practical side to this, as larger locomotives would be longer and necessitate changes to the railway infrastructure, notably in the provision of bigger turntables. The railway's chief mechanical engineer, Samuel Johnson, turned to the principle of compounding to get more power from his locomotives. In this, steam is used twice before exhausting to the atmosphere, at first in conventional small high-pressure cylinders, and then in larger diameter low-pressure cylinders. The system had been in use in Great Britain with varying degrees of success, notably by the Webb compounds of the London and North Western Railway, unsuccessfully, and didn't have a good reputation. Johnson's design was without doubt the most successful in Great Britain, and the first locomotive, number 2631, was built in 1901. The design was subsequently improved by his successor, Dealey, who added 40 to Johnson's total of just 5. 2631 was renumbered 1000 in 1907, and between 1914 and 1919, the original 5 Johnson engines
Oh, look
were
at
rebuilt
Diesel.
to conform with the Dealey locomotives that were also being rebuilt with superheaters at that
Devious
time.
Diesel.
Thereafter, all the engines were effectively one class, and the magnificent number 1000, which emerged from Derby Works in 1959, was representative of the final Midland Railway express locomotive design, rather than an original Johnson engine.
Toot, toot, chug, chug, chug. There's no steam!
Number 1000 had been preserved as part of the British Transport Commission's collection, which was then housed at Clapham Museum in London.
This is basically
There was a
Sean's
movement at the
shit
time to
fucks
preserve
up in other
locomotives
stories.
as working examples, which had been started in
Ooh, it's a
1957
Genty!
when the
Oh,
Great Western
fuck.
City Class
And we got
engine,
Genty
City of
disease, don't
Truro,
watch this video
had been
now.
returned to steam after nearly 25 years as a static museum piece. It's interesting to note that While number 1000 in its original guise had been built in 1901, the Great Western engine was 2 years its junior, but the Midland engine went directly from service to a working retirement.
I heard they had to hand coal this, by the way. Like, they couldn't, like, put coal in it from, like a coal hopper. They had to
Official
hand coal it.
photographs were taken at Wirksworth, the traditional place for Midland Railway photography. This second photographic session took place in front of the local schoolchildren, many of whom it was hoped would be railway roundabout viewers. The engine had been taken back to Derby to be turned to allow pictures of both sides. She was finished in the full glory of the Midland's Crimson Lake livery, with that railway's heraldic achievement on the cab sides,
On the
topped by
cab
famous
side.
wyvern. Indeed, she was to rise like another mythical bird, the phoenix, when she returned to steam inside Derby's roundhouse, preparatory to her first trial run from Derby to Leicester. These film shots were taken at slow speed, as the light was very low inside the roundhouse.
Oh yeah, I forgot they had to hand crank that. Wheel slip.
The trial run started from Derby Station. The man on the right is John Scholes, the first curator of the Clapham Museum for the British Transport Commission. The restoration of number 1000 was very much his project, and he was extremely particular in ensuring the magnificent finish was not harmed. The engine was coaled by hand and banned from passing under a coaling chute.
See?
Pat Whitehouse had the full cooperation of Derby on this trial run and rode in the first coach.
That kind of a little
Leaning out the window,
too
he recalls
shaky.
that 3 people held his legs for these shots.
God, let me tell you, that thing's shaking so much. I'd probably call a freaking. I'd probably get someone to hold that goddamn camera before it falls out.
The outward trial finished at Leicester Midland Station. The locomotive was then turned and ran back to Derby, where it was, of course, originally built and rebuilt.
Oh, is there a Black 5? I see a tank engine, a Black 5, a diesel. Wait, a diesel? Angry!
It was run to celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the Stevenson Locomotive Society, or SLS, which was founded in 1909. And the tour started at Birmingham New Street, from the Midland's number 4 platform.
Black and white and other stories. Where's the SLS headboard?
The train ran north via Derby Midland, where it
Darby.
was photographed.
Darby is. I thought Darby
Carried on
was
to the north via
D-A-R-B-Y,
Handgate,
not
Sheffield Midland Station. Another
D-E-R-B-Y.
protocol.
Sheffield. I was about to say Sharfield. Sheffield.
The train's destination was York, where the locomotive was eventually to be housed at the National Railway Museum, which became the successor to Clapham. She was destined for a further spell of mainline working in the early 1980s, but is now retired again alongside the pride of York, the famous Mallard, which was still a mainline locomotive in 1959.
Hey, look, it's Mallard.
Number 1000's mentor, John Scholes, was instrumental in drawing up the famous British Railways list of historical locomotives for eventual preservation, which of course included both number 1000 and Mallard. Today that list forms the backbone of the collection of the National Railway Museum at York, where these locomotives are preserved for the benefit of the nation, along with the railway roundabout films themselves, from which this series of programs has been prepared. Scottish locomotives enjoyed their own preservation program,
Scotland.
based on Glasgow Transport Museum. In the late 1950s, a number of historical Scottish locomotives were preserved in working order and were used for a series of trains in connection with the 1959 Scottish Industries Exhibition, held alongside Kelvin Hall Station, on the northwest side of Glasgow city centre.
Hey, look, it's 1, 2, 3.
The first of the quartet of Scottish engines is the Caledonian Single, which is followed by the Great North of Scotland Railway 440 Gordon Highlander. Astanio Coronation Pacific stands by at Glasgow Central as two other historic locomotives reverse out of
City
the
of
Caledonian
Truro!
terminus. The Scottish quartet had been augmented by the Great Western City of Truro, making its furthest ever trip north, and a highly unusual pairing with the third Scottish locomotive, the North British 440 Glen Douglas.
Glen
Glen
Douglas.
Douglas was to spend more than 26 years in Glasgow Transport Museum after retirement in 1965, and was presented to Glasgow Corporation in 1966. In 1992, it was brought out again to be prepared for a further period of mainline running. City of
This
Truro
city.
also enjoyed another period of mainline use from 1985 to 1992, and has been preserved as part of the National Collection of the National Railway Museum at York.
Which they're probably never gonna
This
bring
historic
back.
locomotive had been credited with the first recorded speed in excess of 100 miles an hour on a run in April 1904.
1904. I thought it was 1904, not 1904.
Perhaps one of the most elegant 440 designs of all was the Great North of Scotland Railway's Class F. One example was preserved as GNOS's number 49 Gordon Highlander. The engine had been repainted in July 1958 after withdrawal from operating stock, and for the next 7 years worked special trains in the company of the other Scottish preserved engines, which were all shedded at the ex-Caledonian Railway shed at Dawnzone.
We've had a lot of 440s in this. What is this, the year of 440s? Gordon Highlander.
The Caledonian Single number 123 was a unique machine. It was obsolete before it was built, but was a one-off exhibition machine built in 1886 by the Glasgow firm of Nielsen and Company. for an
It's
exhibition
basically
in the city,
Emily,
for
but
which it won a
it's
gold
Caledonian Scottish, but
medal. It was based on the design of the then current Caledonian 440s, altered to have just a single driving axle. After the exhibition, it was sold to the Caledonian Railway and achieved further fame in the railway races to the north in 1888. It was withdrawn in 1935, but retained as it was the last single driver in service. It was returned to working order in the year of this film, 1959, and this was one of its first appearances. The final Scottish historical locomotive was the Highland Railway 460, or Jones Goods.
oh, the Jones
This was the
Goods.
first 460 design in Great Britain and acquired its sobriquet after its designer's name. It was the first of a series of 15 engines numbered from 103 to 117 for the Highland, which later became part of the LMS. That railway withdrew the class between 1929 and 1940, but preserved this engine in view of its historical importance.
His
was
historical
originally painted in
importance.
Highland Railway green,
That's what they say.
but when returned to traffic in 1959, it appeared in Stroudley yellow, a colour it sported for a short while after it was built. This exhibition was one of its earliest appearances after its return to use. It retired once again in 1965 and has not yet returned to work.
Aww.
One of Scotland's most famous routes is that from Fort William to Mallaig in the Western Highlands.
Mallaig.
It was comparatively recently built, opening in the early part of this century, and it opened up one of the most beautiful parts of the country to
Ooh, look
tourists.
at LNER for once. We
Shadow
finally
of
get into the
Glen Nevis train
LNER.
set off over the original West Highland line as far as Mallaig Junction.
We were in
where they
Western
turned
and
northeastwards
Scottish,
towards
and
Bernavia,
we were in Great
where the
Western
railway
and then the
crossed Caledonian
Midland.
Canal,
So
which
now we're
connected
finally
Fort
in
William to
Northeastern.
Inverness.
Finally in the Northeastern region. Basically one of the best railways ever made. The London Northern Eastern Railway. Oh, how I miss them.
The line to our left is a goods loop, serving an industrial siding near Corpac. The line ran alongside Loch Isle as it headed into the mountains. After leaving the lock side, the line begins to climb towards Glenfinnan on gradients of between 1 in 50 and 1 in 60. The line twists and turns as it approaches the famous concrete viaduct at Glenfinnan, with numerous speed restrictions. Pat and John
Speed
travelled on the
25.
train and by road to obtain these views, as part of their visit to the West Highlands when they were filming a pair of Glen 440s on the main line from Fort William to Glasgow in May 1959. Glenfinnan Viaduct is famous for being the first use of concrete in such a structure, built by Concrete Bob McAlpine.
I forgot what type of class that is.
Note the fish fans at the back of the train.
It's a fit. It's the flying kipper.
Glenfinnan was the first stop for this train.
Oh, son of a. A little too fast going around that curve, mate.
Here the train is approaching the top of the climb after Glenfinnan, the last part being 1 in 70.
Shit, that's a hard
Loch
grade.
Haylott was passed non-stop.
One hour later. Damn it, hurry up! We're still not even
The
here
second
yet.
important passing station is at Arisaig, after which the famous white sands can be seen as the train turns to the north alongside the Atlantic Ocean.
The Atlantic Ocean. And then you see Titanic come out and be like, I just referenced Fat Albert, I'm sorry. My leg.
Mallaig is famous for its kippers, and fishing has always been its principal trade. The station is set alongside the small harbour where the hardy fishing fleet was moored. At
Damn.
this time, rail tracks led along the harbour's jetty, and fish traffic was an important source of revenue for
Okay,
the
that's kind of a too much fishing,
Fishlands often
so
ran in passenger trains, but always at the back. Mallaig's other seafaring business was the ferry trade to the Isle of Skye, operated by McBrain's Shipping Company, something of a Scottish institution.
keep off propeller. You don't say. We're not that retarded.
Back at the station, two of Sir Nigel Gresley's Class K2 moguls, a type long associated with the West Highland, stood ready to run back to Fort William, the engine on the left heading a fish train. This is a railway that still sees steam in the summer, as British Rail runs a regular steam-hauled train during the season from Fort William to Mallaig.
It was at this moment that he knew he fucked up, Crash.
Perhaps the most
Brighton
famous
Bell.
electric train of all was the Brighton Bell, the Southern Railway and later Southern Regions.
Finally, we're
all-Pullman
into
electric
Southern
multiple
Region.
unit train, which ran from London Victoria Station to Brighton. There were 3 5-car units for the Brighton Bell service, numbers 3051, 2 and 3. The Pullman Car Company's British workshops were at Brighton, so they were able to keep a watchful eye on them. The mechanical side of the trains were the responsibility of the Southern, whilst the passenger accommodation was Pullman's. The units were painted in the standard Pullman livery of chocolate and cream,
Caution, speed 3 miles an hour. You
First-class
don't
cars
say.
bore female names, whilst third and later second-class cars merely bore numbers. The Brighton Bell units were of both classes, driving cars at each end being second class. The Pullman Car Company's income came from the supplementary fares charged, and for this the traveller was entitled to a reserved seat, service from uniformed attendants, and an at-the-seat meal service at all times. The train attracted a regular clientele, who became very attached to its old-world charm, based on Edwardian standards of travel, a jewel amongst the standardized electric trains that shared the Brighton route. The railway roundabout camera crew went to Brighton Station in 1959 to film the train at the height of its popularity. It had commenced running on the 1st of January 1933 as the Southern Bell, but the name was changed to Brighton Bell 18 months later. It continued to run until the 30th of April 1972, the only break being during the Second World War. The normal formation was 10 cars, the third unit being kept as standby. This also allowed the train to operate as normal when any one of the units was undergoing overhaul. Some off-peak services were formed of one unit only. They never ran any scheduled services other than the Brighton one throughout their careers, although they were occasionally used to form specials.
Clunk. That thing's a 10-car train. That is not really that long.
Arrival at London Victoria was within an hour of leaving Brighton. 2 up and 2 down trains were run daily. All 15 Brighton Bell Pullman cars exist today. Some of them still work regularly out of Victoria Station in the British formation of the Venice-Simplon Orient Express. Others are used as restaurants or as coaching stock on preserved railways.
Is that a woman driving? Oh my god.
Many of the boys who
King's
watched
Cross.
the railway roundabout were avid train spotters, or rather loco spotters, as their principal interest was in the steam locomotive, and collecting the numbers by recording them in the famous Ian Allen ABC Loco Spotters books was a huge hobby. The Ian Allen Loco Spotters
Kids,
Club
this
was
is
founded in the
basically
1940s,
where the
and
eastern,
grown into
the
a
northeastern
sizable
region
organization by
is.
the 1950s. Many members harbored the ambition to become a driver. The club organized a number of rail tours over unusual routes or with unusual or special motive power and held club meetings. However, the ultimate thrill for the young loco spotter was a shed bash. Again, these were organized by the club, but many a railway enthusiast of today can recall the back ways in through broken fences, and perhaps the tip of the shed foreman's boot as they left the premises rapido. By dint of their good connections with British Railways, Patrick Whitehouse and John Adams were able to arrange shed visits on an official basis, and were able to bring the legendary sheds to
Mallard.
all the local
That's
spots in
Mallard.
the country through the
It's
television
Mallard.
medium. The ultimate legend of all, number 60022 Mallard, the fastest steam locomotive ever, was the first to be seen when the cameras were taken to King's Cross Shed in London. This was the principal metropolitan shed for the Eastern region and its forebears, the London and North Eastern Railway and Great Northern Railway, and it was always known colloquially as Top Shed.
Oh, there's one of its brothers or sisters. I forgot the name. What's the name of it? Oh, you can't even read it. So there's Mallard. Thought that her casting on the wheels.
Note the corridor connection on the back of the tender. This was provided to allow a change of engine crew on the move on non-stop expresses. to
The
Newcastle.
Flying Scotsman.
Top Shed always had an allocation of Sir Nigel Gresley's streamlined A4 Pacifics, of which Mallard was the most famous. But at the time of this visit, the shed also was host to what is today the most famous steam engine in the world, Flying Scotsman.
Flying
The
Scotsman
LMDR's first
coming
Pacific
through.
was still on top linkway. had recently been modified with a double blast pipe and chimney.
Blech.
It was later to have German-style smoke deflectors added, which further changed its appearance.
Hey, there's a 9F. Okay, question. Scotsman doesn't have a corridor. Why is that?
Abbotsford was one of the post-war developments of LNER Pacifics, belonging to A.H. Peppercorn's A1 class. The next engine is one of Sir Nigel Gresley's V2 262 class, known as Green Arrows, after the Pioneer engine, which is preserved today. Although classified as mixed traffic, this V2 is painted in the full express passenger lime green livery. Another A4 is number 29 Woodcock.
Woodcock!
Of top-link locomotives.
Take the wood out of Woodcock, it's just cock.
By contrast, the suburban tank of Class N2 is decidedly unkempt.
Oh, it's lying!
Diesel shunters had already made an impact, as had the short-lived North British Type 1 diesel electrics used on King's Cross suburban services.
Ew. It's the Flying Scotsman!
By contrast, our next shed bash, also in the former London and North Eastern or LNER Railways territory, was to British Railways' latest high-tech shed at Thornaby on Teesside.
Yeah, I heard of
Shed
this.
was located in the very cradle of railways, a little to the east of Stockton-on-Tees, and its principal function was to service the mineral and freight locomotives, which were
Wheel
the
slip.
mainstay of the industrial North East. Former North Eastern Railway Class Q6080 tender engines formed the backbone of Thornaby's fleet. There were 120 engines in this class, the products of Darlington Works from 1913 to 1921. The reason for this visit was to film the brand new facilities which had been installed here in 1959. Even as late as this in the steam locomotive's career, British Railways still needed to invest in new infrastructure. Thornaby was the jewel in the steam railway's crown and was completely constructed in that brave New World's material, reinforced concrete.
Reinforced concrete.
Overhead water gantries and underlit pits were borrowed from the latest American practice, and every effort had been made to make the environment of the shed as clean as possible. A very difficult thing to do in a place as inherently dirty as a steam locomotive shed.
What's that, an ashtray? Oh god, yeah, that is. Ash pit.
Such was the regard paid by BR to Railway Roundabout that a locomotive was provided to play to the cameras. Although BR was still building steam engines, just a few Class 9Fs remaining on order, it was to be a mere 8 years until all the Q6s had gone. Thornaby was declared redundant, although some of its facilities were adapted for use by diesels.
Forgot what class that is. I know it was built by someone named Raven.
The depot had two power-operated turntables. Traditionally, turntables were hand-operated or utilized the vacuum ejectors of locomotives. The shed itself was of the roundhouse pattern, with another turntable serving radial stabling roads. This shed was to outlast steam, being finally demolished in the 1990s. Our final shed bash in 1959 takes us back to Birmingham, home of Railway Roundabout, and of the Midland Railway's Saltley Shed. This was the largest shed in the
4F.
Birmingham district, situated a short distance to the east of Birmingham New Street Station, alongside the Midland's main line to Derby in the north. In
Oh, never
1959,
mind, that's
its
4F.
allocation still included classic Midland designs, such as these 3F and 4F 060s, as well as the most modern motive car.
The 9S.
The educational aspect of Railway Roundabout was not overlooked.
Ooh, a huge
and
crab.
This Crab 260 Mogul was used to illustrate the driver's preparation duties. It was essential for a driver to learn and know every type of engine he would be driving, as he had to ensure that every oiling point was attended to, or else trouble would be just around the corner.
There's standard 5.
Another locomotive was picked out at Saltley to illustrate a feature. This is one of British Railway's standard Class 5 460s, which had been built with Caprotti valve gear. This rotary action valve gear was the final steam locomotive development of any consequence in Great Britain, and might have become the standard form of gear if steam locomotives had had any further developments. The shed had a number of Stanier's 3-cylinder 460-5X or Jubilee class engines for mainline work to both Derby and Sheffield in the north and Bristol in the south. The shed itself was a double roundhouse and had both freight and passenger locomotives on its allocation. The Midland had a second Birmingham shed at Bourneville on the other side of New Street, which dealt with local passenger duties and freight.
It looks like it's saying cocaine.
The principal LMS design of heavy freight engine was Sir William Stanier's Class 8F, a number of which were shedded here. For the heaviest duties, BR Standard Class 9F spaceships worked from Saltley. This was the third last steam engine to be built at Crewe Works, and numerically of the class, although Swindon was to continue to build them throughout 1959 and into 1960. Saltley's allocation worked through to Carlisle on overnight fast freights via Derby and Sheffield. Two earlier members of the class illustrate the only obvious alterations made to the design: the shape of the tender and the fitment of double chimneys to the last built engines.
Look, it's Gary. It's Gary, Barry, and something else. I forgot. Terry. Yeah, Terry. My character.
Our final 1959 feature returns us to those glorious summer days of our youth when the sun always shone and carefree holidays were easily available, or so it seems. In rural Devon, on the southern border of Dartmoor, the Great Western's West of England main line spawned a number of branch lines, of which that to Kingsbridge, at the head of the Salcombe River estuary, was perhaps the best known. The branch connected with the main line at Brent, and we open with a view of number 5558, which has just come up from the coast with the train and is running round. Our next view is at the second of three intermediate stations on the line at Gara Bridge, where the camping coaches visited in 1958 are seen to the right. This was the only crossing point.
A Great Western Railway.
Loddiswell was the station between Gara Bridge and the terminus at Kingsbridge. It also boasted a camping coach in the goods yard.
A camping coach.
5573 Scenic Kingsbridge was one of the later series of these 4500 tanks. There were two distinct versions, the earlier ones with flat-topped side tanks and the later version with sloping tanks, which gave them an increased working range. These tanks could take 1,300 gallons, whilst the earlier engines could carry only 1,000 gallons. There were 100 of these later engines which were officially known as the 4575 class, whilst the earlier examples numbered 75 of class 4500.
Water. God damn, I don't know how those fucking pistons can fit on a tank engine. They're fucking big.
The letter C on the cab side was the Great Western's route code and power classification system. The colour indicated over which routes the locomotives could work, yellow giving the widest route availability, with the exception of uncoloured, which could go anywhere. The power classification covered the letters A to E, E being the highest, but this doesn't mean the 4500s were particularly powerful, as the system took into account brake capacity as well as tractive effort. Green lined-out livery was an example of BR gilding the lily, as the engines were plain green in GW days. The coaches used on the branch trains were the Great Western's standard B-set coaches, two identical vehicles forming a train. Small destination boards could be seen on these above the doors. Back at Gara Bridge, an earlier 4500 tank is on the train, followed by another of the 4575 type. The branch was the first choice of a group of enthusiasts wishing to preserve a West Country branch line when it was threatened with closure in 1963. But sadly, BR removed the track before agreement could be reached, and the Dart Valley line was saved instead. Our last shot is back at Brent, where a palm tree sums up the Great Western's image of the English Riviera.
There goes another one. And there we go, that's Railway Roundabout. Got the carrot. Yeah, with the ending they just use that and that's it. Yeah, BBC made this. Yeah, I'm not even gonna get it. So anyway, in recent standards, since I'm tired. Usually this does not tire me, but just for today, it did tire me and I couldn't help it. And they just repeated the freaking same thing. If anyone thinks they would like to see any more of this, leave a comment below in the comments. See if I would be able to do it. Railway Roundabout 1959. National Railway Museum of York. Patrick Whitehouse and John Adams. Rail Scene Limited. And there we go, guys. That's the end of it. And so this will be the end of the stream. So bye for now.